I think that Kevin's overview was actually rather excellent. And it's difficult for me to add much to that litany. On the Northern Ireland question, yes, I think he's absolutely spot on. However, do not underestimate the ideological drive of the group that has taken over the Conservative Party. I actually think there's more to Steve Baker taking over in Northern Ireland than meets the eye. I don't think it's an innocent choice. And that says something about the power structure in the Conservative Party now and who is actually calling the shots. You need to simply look at her ministers. I mean, under Boris, let's face it, many of the old Remainers had been booted out, though there's a bit of a paradox there because Truss was supposedly a Remainer, but I think she was a little bit like Theresa May, a Remainer on the outside, but rather difficult to pin down on the inside. So I absolutely agree with Kevin here. I guess the contribution, or the short contribution that I would make is simply this. How are things going to play out over the next 2 or 3 years? And I think here, in terms of the dynamics of internal politics, and here I'm talking about Westminster, I absolutely agree with Kevin that we have over the horizon, in fact, coming very, very fast towards us, a constitutional crisis vis-a-vis Scotland. There's no doubt that, if you like, the dynamics, the logic, the economic logic of the agreement that our hard Brexiteers negotiated, aided and abetted by the DUP, will actually result economically and eventually constitutionally in exactly what they wanted to avoid. And incidentally, May's solution would have avoided it. So without a doubt. But no, I'm really interested to see it over the next few months. What is the debate going to be? And I think it was clear today that the parameters were set by the answers that Truss gave during question time. And here, the fundamental question, and it is about energy and the economic mess that the Boris legacy has left us with, which is partly about Brexit, partly about COVID, partly, though I think far less than they argue, to do with what's happening in the Ukraine and energy prices and so on. That could have been managed. It's actually been mismanaged when you compare the way we've dealt with it with the way member states of the European Union have actually dealt with it. So for me, what are the big issues? Well, I think the fundamental issue is who pays? And I think Starmer here was absolutely right in that very short and sharp question. Who is going to pay? Who is going to bear the burden of energy prices, inflation, a national health service that is on its hind legs? Talking personally about this, I mean, Kevin talked about an ambulance waiting, an hour and 10 minutes. I am waiting for the results of an MRI scan 4 months after the event. So it affects everybody. So in a sense, who is going to pay for this mess? Who is going to bear the burden? Is it going to be everybody? But quickly that means that those who will bear the burden the most are those who can least afford to bear that burden. Or is it going to be those who unexpectedly have capitalized on it? Now, that will be the battle line, I think, over the next few months. And I do suspect that the warnings that the police and others are putting forward about social unrest, for the first time, might actually be correct. I think over the next 3 or 4 months, things are going to get pretty bad for a lot of people. I think things are going to get pretty bad on the street. The second dividing line, or the second issue, I guess, which will determine, is this question of Brexit, without a doubt. Here, I think the fundamental issue is not whether we're going to rejoin or not dear colleagues, dear friends, forget it. Ask yourselves, do they want us back, given the troubles that we caused? The real question is, and this really is to the opposition, not the government. The government will sustain itself not on some kind of pragmatic approach. No, they're ideologically committed. I think Truss and her ministerial team are of that ilk. They're not pragmatists. And their whole future and their status, if you like, their holding on power depends on them remaining in that line. However that plays out in Northern Ireland, domestically, in the Conservative Party, that's the power structure. So the real question for the opposition is, and here I was very critical of Starmer's when he said, let's move on from Brexit. And I could, after reflecting on it, I actually agree. Let's move on from Brexit. Let's focus on the kind of relationship we actually want with the European Union. Because until now, the relationship has been awful, terrible, and really, it can't continue in that way. So, is Truss going to change our relationship with the European Union? Is it going to be more cooperative, or are we going to continue to go down the track that Truss indicated that, oh, well, the jury's out on Macron, friend or foe? I mean, this is the stuff of fantasy, but these are, if you like, important dividing lines, really. And I don't see Truss moving on. I think our relationship with the EU will remain as bad and duplicitous or perfidious, to quote Napoleon, but 300 years ago, 200 and odd years ago, as unfortunately people like Boris developed it. I think the third issue that is going to define the Truss relationship, and certainly domestic politics, over the next few years, is this question of levelling up. I think that was a brilliant strapline developed by people like Cummings, who of course is one of the architects of the mess we're in, but it was brilliant. It actually captured the imagination of those who voted for Brexit in those communities that had nothing to lose. That's why they voted for Brexit. We must never forget that. So on levelling up, how are we going to pay for levelling up? Given that tomorrow we're going to have announced that actually there's going to be a freeze and that we're going to borrow the money to deal with that, you know, our level of debt is already massive. But what's going to happen to levelling up? How are we going to pay for levelling up? And that, of course, then casts a shadow on the kind of things that were being talked about before, on the structure of local government, the financing of local government, and so on. And of course, the final issue, and then I will stop, that's going to define the next couple of years is actually the National Health Service, which is basically broken down and in a mess. And again, how is that going to be financed? How is that going to be paid for, given the decisions that are going to be taken tomorrow? And remember, tomorrow, because she told us today, we are going to have tax cuts. That's the preferred option. But who will benefit from tax cuts? If you're on 25,000 a year, are you really going to benefit from tax cuts? If you're on 100,000 a year, of course you may do. Questions of relativities. So as far as I can judge, these are the 4 or 5 issues that are going to define how things play out over the next 2 years. I really do believe that she has become Prime Minister because she is continuity-less. She has the support of essentially those who were behind, for the most part, who were behind, well, actually, crushing majority. You simply need to look at who she's appointed as ministers to work that out. Basically, Boris, how can I put it, the Boris clique. But remember, because they supported her and they've already got rid of one Prime Minister, her room for maneuver, unless miracles happen, her room for maneuver is limited. Because when you get into the habit of getting rid of a Prime Minister every 2 years, getting rid of another one who is already not exactly highly regarded, in the country at this point in time, and not exactly highly regarded. Don't be fooled by all that, you know, hurrah, hurrah in the Commons today. I believe she didn't have majority support amongst Tory MPs. So we're moving into a state of high turbulence, a great deal of continuity, and an approach that basically will see Truss adopt options that support those who already support her, and the kind of line we've seen over the last few years, they will take it from there, really. So it's how the opposition reacts that's going to be crucial. And I think I'll stop there.